Before we begin, please take a moment to review the disclaimer in the episode description. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Now let's get started. Welcome to Wound Basics, the podcast that does exactly what it says on the tin, helps people to understand the basics of wound care. I'm Dr. Frances Henshaw. Today I'm joined by Tal Ellis. Tal has extensive knowledge of the aged care sector, and today he'll be helping us to understand the aged care quality indicators and what they mean for wounds. Tal, give us the top line. Tell us about the aged care quality indicators.
So we know that the aged care quality indicators were a piece of work that came out of the Royal Commission, which certainly were put in place more stringently following the Royal Commission into aged care. Why did that happen? Because it was realised that despite all our best efforts, there were still things that we were missing, and people were not receiving the standard of care that we would expect to be able to deliver. And so essentially the quality indicators for aged care are part of the National Aged Care Mandatory Quality Indicator Program, or it's called the QI program. And basically what it does is it helps the residential aged care providers improve their service. So it's not a punitive thing. It's not necessarily about punishing people. It's about identifying the areas that we really need to concentrate on. Those things that when the Royal Commission was held that we found were a really big problem in aged care and that we wanted to address and that we wanted to be transparent about. So actually what happens is that if you're a manager in a residential aged care facility, you actually have to submit data information every 3 months against these particular indicators. And they range from things like pressure injuries, which you and I have talked about more recently, through to restraint of people losing weight without any planning around that. Things like falls, making sure that medications are given properly, making sure that people have help with their activities of daily living, incontinence, which we've talked about in this program before, hospitalisation, things like workforce consumers, and also quality of life, which is the most important thing. So that's essentially what they're all about.
So basically the data helps us to monitor the quality of care that are given to residents, and I guess they give relatives and friends of people who are in a residential aged care facility the comfort to know that people are actually monitoring the care of their loved ones, and therefore if something is spiking and perhaps a facility's having more incidences of something, then they've got an opportunity to recognise this and remediate it, rather than just let things slide and descend until the point where something bad happens to residents, or they end up on the front page of the newspaper, which of course nobody wants. So every 3 months the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare publishes the national, state and territory quality indicator data, so we can actually see how everything's performing. So in the context of a healthcare worker, Tal, what can healthcare workers do to help ensure compliance with quality indicators, and how can they contribute to improving outcomes of residents in aged care?
That is a really, really good question, because I think that sometimes when we talk about this high-level stuff and we start mentioning things like the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare or the National Aged Care Mandatory Quality Indicator Program, people go, well, that's for somebody else. That's for the bosses, or that's for the people who own the facilities, whatever. It's not about that at all. It's about all of us who interact with people who are in facilities need to be vigilant, and we need to be vigilant around the areas that cause people the greatest level of harm if they're not dealt with properly. So we just think about a pressure injury. I think we've talked before about the fact that, it's everyone's responsibility to be constantly assessing and reassessing people, to be looking for changes in the skin, and to be identifying what we think might be a pressure injury, or in fact what is a pressure injury, and making sure that that gets reported, not so that somebody can get punished, not so that somebody can be blamed, but because that way that the person who is experiencing or suffering from that problem can actually receive the care that they're supposed to get. And I think that's very, very important. This also goes for incontinence. We all know that incontinence in the group of people who we are cared for in residential aged care typically suffer from incontinence more as a percentage than in the general population of people. So incontinence care is extremely important, and the consequences of not adhering or making sure that people are getting really good continence care is what we've talked about in previous podcasts with incontinence-associated dermatitis, which is that damage to the skin. Now, often that's nobody's fault. I mean, sometimes it can't be helped if the person's not seen for a period of time because they're in some other part of the facility. You know, the dermatitis can happen really, really quickly. So it's not about a blame game. It's really about you going, oh my goodness, this has happened. This is something that really does need to be reported because it does cause injury or suffering, and making sure that steps are taken to help the person who's suffering from that, and also make sure that steps are taken to identify, well, what went wrong? What can we do? Sometimes it's a near miss thing too. It's like, oh my goodness, that was nearly a big problem. So let's actually talk about that. What was nearly a big problem? I mean, this is around falls and major injury. This is a big thing. You know, if you see hazards and you see somebody trip but they don't actually fall, you think to yourself, right, now how come that was sitting out in the corridor? How come that was sitting in the lounge room that they were living in? So I think, you know, it's really about all of us taking responsibility, no matter what level of carer we are.
Yeah, and I think the way I look at it is that the government's had the Aged Care Royal Commission. There was over 120 findings, I believe. And from that, they've been able to kind of distill down the major areas where there were problems, and they've been able to shine a light on them. And I think this is a very positive thing for the safety of the people that we love who are in residential aged care facilities. So aged care quality indicators, as you say, are everybody's responsibility to make sure that we know what they are and they're there for a reason. We didn't just pluck them out of the sky and decide this is what we're going to be looking at. There's obviously very high levels of evidence that show that by monitoring these certain 11 criteria, we can actually lead to improvements in the health and well-being and safety of people in residential aged care facilities. So, Tal, thanks so much for explaining this to our listeners today. And is there anything else we have forgotten or need to add in about the quality indicators?
Not at all. I always think of it this way. One day, this is going to be you and me and everyone else. We're all going to get older. We're all going to end up needing different levels of care. And if we all work on this together, then the quality of life for everyone as they age is going to be that much better. So it's something that we need to be transparent about, and it's something that we need to continue to work really hard on.
And that's a wonderful note to leave this episode on. Thank you very much for your insights into the aged care quality indicators, Tal.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Wound Basics. This show was brought to you by Smith & Nephew, shaping what's possible in wound care.